Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about your brain on insulin today. I had a lot of questions. We've been talking about neurology or neuropathy and edema and a number of other things. And so, one of the big questions I promised to answer was about migraine headaches and how all of this is linked to insulin resistance. So, my name is Misha. I am not a doctor, a scientist, any of that. I'm just a real world woman, a real human like the rest of you who got really sick, didn't get answers, wasn't getting better, found a system, started getting better, and started questioning why, when no one else was helping me, this seemed to be the answer. And as I've learned, I've wanted to share this information with you guys so you don't have to be in the place I was in where you're not getting answers from your doctors, you're feeling hopeless and helpless, and you just want a way out. So, I'm going to talk about one of the ways out. We're going to talk about I'm going to hit migraines first because that was the question asked, but we're going to talk about Parkinson's. We're going to talk about autism. We're going to talk about ADHD. This is a long one, and I have a lot of notes because remember, I'm not the doctor. I did a lot of study. I have a lot of citations and notes here. So let's dive in to how your brain functions on insulin resistance and how insulin resistance is impacting your brain. Ask questions throughout because it's important that you guys get your answers. Again, if I don't know the answer, I will go find it and we'll come back and talk about it later. But it's important to me that you guys get the information you need. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to be talking about the protocol that got me on this path in the first place when all the medications weren't helping. So it's important, and I'm going to discuss exactly how this is helping. This protocol can be helping your brain by addressing insulin resistance. So hold on, let's dive in. Yes, it's going to take a while. If you can't stay for the whole talk, it will be on YouTube at Brilliant Health with Misha when I'm all done. It's also on my Facebook page, Brilliant Health with Misha. Um, and I have a group there called Beating Insulin Resistance. You can use my link in my profile at any time to access any of the places I'm on or the resources I have. All right, including the protocol if you just want to jump ahead. But the whole thing will be listed on those places. Okay, so let's talk about this because in the past 2 decades, our understanding of insulin's role in the brain has grown significantly. And it's because it was once thought to have no effect on the brain. They used to think that, insulin wasn't thought to affect a lot of things in the body, and we're now discovering how much it affects everything, and this includes our brain. So we now know that insulin resistance or insulin regulates hormones and numerous brain processes, and this insulin resistance possesses a serious threat to brain health. It Brain cells have insulin receptors that respond to this hormone just like every other cell in the body. In the brain, what's happening is insulin is stimulating glucose uptake for fuel. The brain likes glucose for fuel. We'll talk about another source of fuel for the brain in a bit. It promotes cell growth and survival. It regulates appetite and energy use. It influences reproductive hormones and it aids in learning and memory formation. Insulin does all of that. So, why is it a problem to have too much? Because the brain starts to shut down to all of that when it's perceiving insulin as a threat instead of an ally. And in insulin resistance, much of the body sees the hormone insulin as a threat and not an ally. So now we start to have problems because insulin is extremely important to the entirety of our body. Every single cell in our body has insulin receptors on them, meaning we need insulin, but we're just inundated by it and we're shutting down to the clues of it because of that. So, in a study on rats, not a human study, but a study on rats with an artificial type of type 1 diabetes or an induced type of type 1 diabetes, this study showed that insulin administration improved the rats' memory performance in maze tests. The rats that were type 1 diabetic and unable to produce insulin failed these maze tests and cognitive tests time and time again. And once they started giving those type 1 diabetic rats insulin, they started to improve. And that started showing the importance of insulin in brain function. How do we dictate if we need more or less? A blood test. So I can give you that answer in a little bit. I want to get through all the science, but yes, there are tests that you can do to tell if you're insulin sensitive or insulin resistant. This question is coming on TikTok, so I'm going to tell you in my profile on those tabs above all of my videos, there are some links, and one is called How to Tell. The calculations that you can use and the HOMA IR test that you can ask your doctor for, it's all listed in those videos. And they're in a short form video. So go check those videos out. That'll give you an immediate answer. I can give the answer later on in this talk, but I really want to stay focused on the brain health right now. So thank you for that question. And I'm glad I already have a video up to help you with that. All right. So when the brain becomes insulin resistant, several problems happen. You start experiencing overeating and weight gain. You have impaired short term learning. You have long term memory damage, and you have accelerated brain aging. And research has found that for every 10 years that you're insulin resistant, your brain looks 2 years older than someone of the same age without insulin resistance. That's how much impact it has on your brain. So every 10 years you're insulin resistant, your brain is aging 2 years faster. The problem is that most of us, like this question asked, are not being told we're insulin resistant because it's just not being tested for. It's not being tested until it's diabetes, and diabetes means that insulin has gotten to a point where the glucose in the bloodstream is just too high. Glucose in the bloodstream is still handled by insulin, even in insulin resistance, by storing it in your fat cells. When your fat cells start to become too full and say, I can't take any more, then it spills out into your bloodstream. Now you're diagnosed as diabetic, but you could have been insulin resistant for 10, 20, like me, 30 years before you ever got the diagnosis of diabetes. So 10, 20, 30 years, when it might have been a little more for me, that my brain was insulin resistant and I didn't know it, which means that 2, 4, 6 years, six years of aging happened to my brain during that time that I had no control over or thought I had no control over. So, yeah. And even so, Free Thinker says her doctor said she's pre diabetic, so I don't think you've hit a no return point. I don't personally believe that you are at a no return point even when you hit the diagnosis of diabetes. That's a big lie that we've been told, that diabetes is progressive and irreversible. My A1C was 7.4 and climbing. I was clearly diabetic. My liver was failing. I lost my gallbladder, but I've still reversed my diabetes. My A1C is now 5.3, and all of these symptoms that I had are gone. So I reversed it using the protocol and understanding what's really causing diabetes. And so hang on, because we're going to go over all of that. Diabetes is completely reversible if it's type 2. When it's not reversible is when you've let diabetes type 2 go along so far that your pancreas is so damaged that it can no longer produce insulin or produce insulin at the levels that we need it to. So we want to address it before your pancreas gets so damaged that you're now basically type 1 diabetic and have to have insulin injected. I don't think anybody wants to get to that point. So let's stop it in its tracks, reverse it now so you can start to feel better. Okay. So prediabetes definitely means it's reversible. Diabetes type 2 still means it could be reversible. You guys, I'm going to have to, my phone is dying. Yikes. I don't know if I have a plug-in here. I do. Hold on a second. It's short. What am I going to do with this short cord? How do I not have my phone plugged in? Well, I'm going to take you guys with me over on Facebook, YouTube. We're going to pause for just a second. I'm going to go grab the phone cord and then we'll be right back. I apologize, you guys. Normally, that's all set up already, and it's not right now. So I'm searching for where I even put my phone cord. We're going to continue talking about migraine and brain function. We're going to include ADHD and autism in all of this because it's important that we understand how much this is happening to the brain. So how much work? All right, you guys, we're going to head out into my desk and finish this talk. That's hilarious. This happened. Because now you have a glimpse of what my life is really like. Yay! Okay. Let me get this plugged in so it doesn't die, and then we will continue on. All right, guys, I found the cord. Oh, and up, plug it in, plug it in, and we're good. All right, let's get back to it. Sorry about all of that. It's Friday, and it's a crazy Friday. So, cord's plugged in, phone shouldn't die. Let's get back to all of this science. We were talking about how insulin affects the brain. So we know that it's increasing hunger. We know that it's impairing short-term memory, decreasing long-term memory, and accelerating your brain aging. So the link between, I get nervous when stuff like that happens. The link between insulin resistance and the brain, or insulin in the brain, has real consequences on the overall well-being and our overall well-being and independence. Meaning, if we want to stay in control of our cognitive functions, in control of our life, we've got to take care of our brain, which means we've got to take care of insulin resistance. So it can lead to severe brain-related diseases, with Alzheimer's being the most common. But I'm going to start with migraine headaches because that was a question that was asked, and then we're going to go into Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all these others. So understanding the connection between insulin resistance and your brain is crucial for maintaining that brain health and preventing cognitive decline as we age. By addressing insulin resistance, we may be able to protect our brains and reduce the risk of developing any neurodegenerative diseases in the first place. It can even help slow down even the genetic types of neurodegenerative diseases by not adding to the problem. And insulin does add to the problem with all of these, and we'll discuss why in just a second. But so let's start with those migraine headaches. They're a prevalent neurological disorder affecting approximately 18% of adults in the United States. So does anybody in here suffer from migraine headaches? Like, they're debilitating. I've only had a few, thank goodness. And I started having migraine headaches the closer I became to being diabetic. I noticed as my health, when we look back now, was declining and I was hitting this diabetic stage. As my A1C started hitting like 7 and above is when I started having migraine headaches. I don't have them anymore. They were horrible. If you've never had one, like I couldn't stand light, I couldn't stand noise, my head just hurt. I wanted to crawl under the blankets and literally just suck my thumb and hope that it would all go away. Migraine headaches are horrible, but here's what's happening. So studies have shown us that there's a strong correlation between insulin resistance and migraine frequency. It typically, I have hair. It typically affects middle-aged women with insulin resistance, and they're twice as likely to experience regular migraines than anybody who has a normal insulin level. Both men and women with migraines have significantly higher insulin levels compared to those without migraines. So it affects women more, but it affects both men and women. So let's not get that twisted. Men, you're not safe from this. Women are just more likely to see it happen than men are. But if you have insulin resistance, you're already at a higher risk for migraines than people without it. So what's really happening here is with insulin resistance, there's a couple of things. We're not getting glucose to the brain, so the brain perceives a drain of energy. And when there's no energy, or the brain thinks it's running on empty, the brain starts to hurt. So this hypothesis for the link between insulin resistance and migraines in this running on empty scenario goes like this. When insulin resistance occurs, glucose can't efficiently enter brain cells, and the brain needs glucose for energy. When we're insulin resistant, and most of us are eating too much, our brain can't access glucose. But remember, there's a second source of energy, and that's fats. But as long as insulin is high, the body never switches into fat burning mode. So now the brain's not getting fats, which it actually prefers for energy, and it can't uptake glucose. So the brain just thinks that it has no energy and it's cranky, and you end up with a migraine headache. So the lack of fuel contributes to brain dysfunction, potentially triggering those migraines, or science has shown, they're just studying this, that they really believe that these migraines are caused by insulin because of the preponderance of evidence surrounding the instances of insulin resistance with people with migraines. So, oh, that's right. So there was another study of, it was a short study, 32 people with regular migraines. Over half of them experienced a significant reduction in migraine frequency when they started being given insulin sensitizing medications. So becoming more insulin sensitive helped them reduce and relieve their migraine headaches. So even though we don't have direct science on it, all of this science shows that insulin is more prevalent in people with migraines, and that reducing the insulin resistance, increasing insulin sensitivity, relieves the migraines. So yeah, your brain feels like it's running on empty. We're going to talk about some neurological disorders and how it's affecting the nerves from communicating in just a minute, and that will make more sense about migraines. But just know, if you're suffering with migraines, you're probably either already diabetic, on your road to being diabetic, or highly insulin sensitive. And if you adjust your insulin sensitivity, you can affect your migraines. Okay. Has anybody ever been told or understood that migraines are linked to insulin resistance before this morning, or that it's linked to insufficiency of energy to the brain before this morning? Did anybody learn anything new in that little short segment about migraine headaches? So if you do have migraine headaches, understand that what we're going to talk about in a little bit, and getting that insulin under control, can help get you your life back, because migraines are no joke. So understanding the relationship between insulin resistance and migraines can lead to more effective prevention and treatment strategies. And by addressing insulin sensitivity, you can reduce the frequency and severity of migraines, improving the life for you and millions of others. If your first time hearing this, so I'm glad you're hearing it now, and I hope it makes sense. I hope it gives you some hope. I hope that you can understand you can get this under control and you don't have to live like that, right? Because if you've been living with migraine headaches, I'm going to say, if you're anything like I was, there's days when you're just like wanting relief from it all, because it's just so debilitating and painful. But let's hop into some of the other things with insulin resistance in the brain. And we're going to start with dementia. We're going to end up with autism and ADHD, because I suffer with those and I want to explain what's happening. But dementia, particularly Alzheimer's, the number one type of dementia, is highly linked to insulin resistance. They didn't used to think so, but studies are now showing these links, and it's Alzheimer's is increasing, especially here in the US, and it's becoming so prevalent that it's posing a significant health challenge for people here in the US. I don't know how many of you have family members who have Alzheimer's, or you feel like they're heading towards that. My own kids were very worried. My son, who's very perceptive and very just like black and white, straightforward kind of guy, started talking to me about Alzheimer's and the cues that he was seeing in me before I got my diabetes diagnosis, before I found the system that reversed my diabetes. And we recently had a conversation, and he let me know how terrified he was of me losing my mind, my cognitive function 3 years ago, and how relieved he is now to have his mother back. You've had migraine headaches for 35 years. Tammy, that's amazing. So Tammy's been on the Feel Great system for almost 2 years, the system I'm going to be talking about. She's hardly had any migraines anymore. So as you started the Feel Great system and started feeling better, those started to diminish, right? And I'm really glad, Tammy, that you're not having them anymore, because when I had them, it was like it was indescribable, the pain. And like you really do, just you can't function. You just want to go lay down and cry, basically. But even crying makes it hurt worse. So let's get back to dementia. And so you guys understand that it's working. It didn't just work for me, Tammy. It's helping her too. All right. So insulin resistance has started to show up as a key factor in Alzheimer's disease pathology, meaning the how Alzheimer's disease develops. Fasting insulin levels are a stronger predictor of Alzheimer's disease risk than age. It's a stronger predictor than hypertension. It's a stronger predictor than smoking status. So it used to be considered that age, hypertension, and smoking were key predictors for Alzheimer's disease. And now they're saying get rid of all of those. I mean, they're there. But the one thing we should be paying attention to is insulin resistance. And the higher insulin resistance you have, becoming pre diabetic and diabetic, the more likely you are to develop any type of dementia. And we're talking Alzheimer's right now. I will talk about like vascular dementia in a minute. But so it's a stronger predictor that you're at risk for Alzheimer's disease. And high insulin levels can increase the production and accumulation of amyloid beta plaques. So you hear a little bit about plaques and tangles in the brain. These plaques are a substance building up not within the nerve pathways, but between the nerve pathways. So nerve A, nerve B, they're supposed to communicate, messages get sent through. But in the meantime, with insulin resistance, it's increasing these plaque buildup that's between the nerves. Now, this message from here can't get to over here because this plaque is in the way. Now, they've noticed an increase in these AB plaques with insulin resistance. Okay. So as insulin resistance progresses, the brain's ability to obtain and use glucose diminishes, leading to compromised brain function. So it also affects the tangles in the brain, and I can explain that in a little bit. But while traditional theories focus on this A, B, or uh, amyloid beta plaque, um, and neurofibrillary tangles, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, the new evidence suggests that there's a way more complex thing going on. And some elderly individuals with plaques and tangles show no signs of dementia. So if plaques and tangles are the reason for Alzheimer's, why is it that so many people that are like in their 70s who have no dementia still show plaques and tangles in the brain? So are they really the cause? That's the question. The metabolic theory of Alzheimer's disease proposes that alterations in the brain's energy metabolism plays a central role in the disease development. Okay. So they're saying now that insulin resistance is a bigger indicator even than finding these plaques and tangles in the brain. Now, the crazy thing is, currently, there's not really a great way to diagnose your risk for Alzheimer's. The only way they can really tell what's going on in the brain with it is to dissect the brain after death. So that's not a really great thing for us right now, right? If you're suffering with Alzheimer's, know someone. By the way, I have people who've had family members who had Alzheimer's. They started them on the system and their cognitive function started to come back. It's not that it's irreversible. Your dementia can start to get better if you start to address insulin resistance and start getting energy to the brain and stop the buildup of some of these plaques and the occurrence of tangles, which are also linked to insulin resistance. All of that's complicated. The real story here is what they're finding now is that insulin, again, plays the biggest role in brain function. So we want to namaste, thank you. So, and let me see what that comment was because I can't read it. The American Brain Council. In fact, you guys, a doctor found one of my short form videos talking about this stuff, and she agreed that insulin resistance is one of the biggest predictors of brain dysfunction than anything else. So there's a lot of science out there now, and especially brain function organizations, brain doctors, who are understanding that The best thing they can do for their patients is to help them address insulin resistance to get their cognition back. It's huge, you guys. It's so much more linked than we've ever thought about before. And they've known about this for 10, 20 years, but they really haven't addressed it, focused on other things. This is something that's been known for a while now. So um, let's take a look. Where was I at in my notes? All right. So the brain has really high energy demands. And if the cells are becoming resistant to that energy, the brain's starting to have malfunction, basically, is what's happening. So this high energy demand makes it the brain particularly vulnerable to metabolic disturbances. So in our Western diet, the brain relies almost entirely on glucose. Remember, the brain likes glucose and the brain likes fats. But because we're so reliant on glucose, it never gets to use fats. And now we have insulin in the way, dampening how much glucose can actually get to the brain or the brain can use. This is going to affect even things like dopamine. We're going to get to that in a minute. Yes, dementia is not forever. You can reverse it. Namaste. Absolutely 100% good degree. So as I was doing this research, and I've thought about it before, but you know who I think about? Michael J. Fox, because it leads into Parkinson's, and my heart goes out to him, and I'm gonna find a way. I'm gonna find a way to try and get through to his team because um, people need to know that even Parkinson's is affected by this insulin resistance in the brain. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. There's a doctor that has reversed Alzheimer's in 60% of his subjects. Namaste. Can you send me his name? Because I would really love to take a look at his work. This is so important, you guys, and more doctors are diving into how much insulin resistance is related to the brain. It's important. So, some elderly individuals with plaques and tangles show no signs of dementia. We mentioned that before, indicating other factors like insulin resistance are involved in it. And this metabolic theory of Alzheimer's disease proposes that alterations in brain energy metabolism plays a central role in the disease's development. So, understanding metabolic origins of Alzheimer's disease, particularly the role of insulin resistance, can open new avenues, like Namaste is talking about, for early detection and intervention of Alzheimer's, meaning you can catch it. Like I was developing Alzheimer's. I had a lot of problems that I don't have now. I feel like I have my life back. My Alzheimer's, impending Alzheimer's, has been reversed. My kids see it. The people in my life that are closest to me see the difference in me in the last 3 years since I've started addressing my insulin resistance. It's huge, you guys. So, monitoring insulin sensitivity and brain glucose metabolism can help your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Again, use those calculations that are in my How to Tell tab. Um, I've got to figure out how to get that set up for Facebook and YouTube, but we'll figure that out. So anyway, use that How to Tell tab, do those calculations. If you show yourself in the risk factor for insulin resistance, it means you're in a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, especially as you get older and all this stuff compounds. All right, so targeting insulin resistance and improving brain energy metabolism can be promising for Alzheimer's disease prevention and treatment. When we look at vascular dementia, the second most common form of after Alzheimer's disease, symptoms often overlap between Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. And while Alzheimer's is primarily characterized by the accumulation of these plaques, remember, impeding nerve function, and tangles in the brain, tangling them up, twisting them up, vascular dementia isn't as linked to those, but as to reduced blood flow to the brain. So in my talk about neuropathy and edema the other day, and in my talks about blood pressure, I talk about the vascular implications of insulin resistance and this reduced vascularity, the reduced blood flow in your blood vessels starting to die off and them having plaques and them just not getting enough blood flow through contributes to this vascular dementia. Double tap the screen. We look this. Thank you, Ro. Thank you. So vascular dementia is affected in a very different way. So Alzheimer's is plaques and tangles, not getting enough energy to the brain. Vascular dementia means we're not getting blood flow to the brain. And when we don't get blood flow, we have the other problems of not getting energy, of not getting nutrients to the brain. And the brain is just literally dying off because it can't get nutrients. Your blood is your delivery system for your nutrients, your hormones, all the stuff that your body needs. That's why you have blood vessels all over, because it's carrying all of this information to all the areas that the body needs. When we reduce the blood flow, we're starting to reduce function throughout the body. And today we're talking about how it's reducing function in the brain. You have to have that blood flow to the brain. The other part is that along with reduced blood flow, we have reduced uptake of nutrients into the brain. The blood-brain barrier is something that hopefully all of us have heard about, at least in passing. So our brain has a natural mechanism or our body has a natural mechanism to protect the brain so that all the toxins and stuff that affect the rest of our body don't hit the brain and just kill off our brain immediately. What's happening with this blood-brain barrier is it's actually the innermost layer of our blood vessels. That's the barrier. That barrier gets damaged with too much glucose in the system, causing little tears in there. But the extra glucose, the extra insulin is also making that barrier thicker and less functional. So now we're not getting stuff through to the brain that we need to get through, but we're at risk for getting stuff through because of these tears in the barrier that can cause problems. We have to pay attention to our blood vessels, and insulin resistance is damaging them. That's causing decreased brain function. Okay, so how this is happening is it's altering nitric oxide production. Blood vessels can't open up and deliver, so they're smaller and tighter and not getting blood flow to the brain. The thickening of the blood vessel walls that I just talked about, again, reducing the amount of nutrients that can get into the brain. And then there's other things like water retention that's causing even more pressure in the blood vessels and can damaging them, and cholesterol buildup that is led from insulin resistance and too much glucose, not fats, not the right kinds of fats anyway. So it's definitely affecting our brain. And the factors that we've just talked about in relation to high, or that I've talked about in relation to high blood pressure, I have talks on high blood pressure. I think I did one just about a week ago. You can find that on YouTube. They contribute to vascular dementia by compromising blood flow to the brain. So it's not just affecting your heart, it's not just affecting your liver, it's really affecting your brain with this reduced blood flow. And the connection between insulin resistance and vascular dementia underscores the more far-reaching consequences of metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction is not just in your muscles, it's not just in your fat cells, it's throughout your body, including your brain. So the cardiovascular complications that arise from insulin resistance not just affect those things and your bones and all of that, but really we want to pay attention to dementia. If you're experiencing dementia, understand too much glucose, too much insulin, get that under control. The dementia can lessen. Now, there's types of dementia that are genetic. Insulin resistance still affects those through all these mechanisms and makes it worse quicker. So if you know you have a genetic disposition towards things like Huntington's or Parkinson's, then one of the best protections you can have in slowing down the progression of that disease is to address insulin in your body and make sure that you're not running into insulin resistance to help stave off the damaging effects of those diseases. So Parkinson's, it's a complex neurological disorder, and it primarily affects movement control. So any of you who know Michael J. Fox and how he went from this vibrant young man to all of a sudden having tics and issues and just twitching all the time, that's Parkinson's. And he'd been suffering with it for a long, long time. And it's sad that no one ever talked to him about glucose control to manage that. But it affects Parkinson's, affects motor symptoms. You have slower movements, you have stiff limbs, you have tremors. It's not a comfortable disease to have. So, non motor symptoms may be things like depression, sleep disorders, fatigue, cognitive changes, and it's progressive in nature. Most patients develop dementia as the disease advances. So, Parkinson's starts out as this motor control thing linked to brain dysfunction. And the longer Parkinson's goes on, the more likely this person is to develop dementia on top of everything else. And it all comes down to insulin resistance and impeding nutrients and blood flow to the brain. So, anybody familiar with Parkinson's? Have you ever heard as a potential therapy for Parkinson's to address insulin resistance or diabetes? Has anybody been ever been told that? Because it blows my mind that I never heard about it before I started doing all this study. No doctor that I worked with ever talked about it. And yet it's probably one of the best things we can do to stave off Parkinson's and the impending dementia that goes with it. Yeah. He needs this, like, it as I was doing it, like, my heart was just breaking for how long he suffered, and that he doesn't have to, and he has a team of medical professionals around him. Why have they not addressed it? Why? Because it's not a medication lining big pharma's pockets? I don't know. One of my partners is doing a talk today, on medications, and he sent me what he plans to talk about, and I thought it was brilliant. So I may go live this weekend and talk about it as well. Another talk for another day. All right. So, um, primary pathological features of Parkinson's disease include a loss of dopamine producing neurons in the main part of the brain called the substantia nigra that controls all of these motor functions. So I want you to hold on to that dopamine part. That with insulin resistance, you're losing dopamine function because that's going to come into play in the next couple of things we talk about. So it also is characterized by the accumulation of Lewy bodies or protein aggregates in the brain. Now, the substantia nigra, located in the midbrain, plays a crucial role in motor control and reward functions. And as a dopamine producing cells in this region start to die off in the substantia nigra, movement issues arise due to dopamine deficiency. So it starts with insulin resistance and ends up causing dopamine problems where your body just is cannot produce or utilize dopamine, and that is devastating, and it links into autism and ADD. Here in just a minute we're going to talk about it. So insulin's been shown to influence dopamine function in the brain, and that means there's a direct link between insulin resistance and Parkinson's disease. Okay, so now it's not just a supposed link. This piece means there's a direct relationship between Parkinson's and insulin resistance, and that means getting insulin sensitivity back can help the progression of Parkinson's. I would hope that it could ease some of those symptoms and bring some function back. I've seen it happen with so many other things. It would be amazing. It would be an amazing thing for the world for people to start understanding insulin resistance and Parkinson's. um, I mean, Michael J. Fox is probably the predominant person that I think of, but I've seen a number of people with Parkinson's. And knowing this now, I'm going to have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. And it's hard because people just sometimes are like, who is this crazy lady and why is she telling me about this stuff? But you know what? You just got to drop the seed, and someplace that seed actually gets some water and some time to ruminate, and it grows into a budding beautiful tree. So all I can do is drop seeds with some people. All right. So in rat studies, lowering insulin levels increased dopamine receptors by 35%. Insulin resistance dampens, so as our insulin sensitivity is worsening and we're building insulin resistance, it's decreasing the function of receptors for dopamine on our cells in our brain. Dopamine's that feel good thing, right? So if we're not able to take that up, now you're also experiencing anxiety and depression because your brain can't use that feel good thing and you're constantly searching for it. So maybe you're doom scrolling, maybe you're overeating looking for pleasure, maybe you're indulging in a lot of other things because you're trying to get that back up and your body just has no way to utilize the dopamine because those receptors are shutting down because of the insulin resistance going on in the brain. Okay. So lowering those levels of insulin in rats increased dopamine receptors, meaning whatever dopamine they had was able to get into the brain better when insulin sensitivity was increased. So, human studies revealed that insulin resistance individuals had lower rates of dopamine production when they had insulin resistance. Okay, so it's not just in rats, it's been in humans that there's studies done that show this correlation between dopamine and insulin resistance, reduced dopamine and increased insulin resistance. So, while it's generally believed that insulin dysfunction leads to dopamine issues in Parkinson's disease, some evidence suggests that, again, it's bidirectional. So, improving dopamine signaling can increase metabolic function. Decreasing dopamine function can decrease metabolic function. So it's not just that the insulin resistance is causing it, but the prevalence of Parkinson's is decreasing metabolic function, causing things to just rapidly get worse. And every time you hear me talk just about there's this bidirectional link showing that one thing worsens the other and that thing worsens the insulin resistance, and it just becomes this overwhelming, I call it cavalcade of problems starting to occur as they work off of each other in a very negative way. And Parkinson's disease is no different when we look at dopamine production and insulin resistance. So improving dopamine signaling can enhance metabolic function, and dampening dopamine signaling can worsen metabolic function and potentially cause insulin resistance. And that relationship is even more supported by observations in patients taking antipsychotic medications. Now, I know some people who are on antidepressants, antipsychotics. Let me know, do you know anybody who's taking antidepressants and whatnot? Because this piece is important. And some will listen and some won't. Maybe they'll catch the drift sooner or later, but you got to drop the seed. So, up to 40% of patients who are on antipsychotics develop type 2 diabetes within 5 years. They're gaining weight. Their moods are a little bit more stable, but they're becoming more metabolically unstable. So, what happens here is if you're on these antipsychotics because you're anxious and you're depressed, which some people absolutely need them, but most of us should understand that it's probably linked to insulin resistance. I'm not saying don't work with your doctor. I'm saying work with your doctor, but understand that by being on those drugs, the condition could have been caused by insulin resistance in the first place, you're worsening the thing that caused the anxiety and depression in the first place. There's a reason why those drugs have to be increased over time, because in the background, they're increasing the problem of insulin resistance. So 30% of Parkinson's disease patients have type 2 diabetes. I wanted to say that within just 2 weeks of removing people from antipsychotic drugs in a controlled study, it showed that their insulin resistance resolved within 2 weeks after being removed from those antipsychotic drugs. There's pretty strong evidence that those antipsychotic drugs are worsening the problem, and yet it's what we're being told to do more and more. So I don't have typical anxiety. I have autism, and autism, I think people get confused with anxiety. An autistic brain wants to make sense of everything. So I'm constantly going over things, planning things, looking over things. And some people would call that anxiety. It's not anxiety, it's just my brain looking for a way to make sense of the world. I don't feel anxious. I'm just making sense of things, like putting a puzzle together. If you saw somebody sitting down and putting a puzzle together, would you automatically assume they're anxious because they're trying to fit this puzzle together. No, they're enjoying themselves. They're putting a puzzle together for a better picture. That's how an autistic brain works. Okay, so we know that insulin resistance is causing a problem. We know that antipsychotic drugs are probably worsening the insulin resistance problem that's underlying, that's the root cause. So we want to know that we have to address insulin resistance to affect all of these brain issues. And it's probably the most direct and easiest way that we can affect migraines, anxiety, depression, staving off Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and vascular dementia. Okay. So we want to know that that is real. So we're going to talk about ADHD. Okay. My issue, my good friend Steph's issue, there's a lot with your metabolism and ADHD, and it's really interesting to me. I dove into the ADHD and autism piece as I was studying and understanding this dopamine reduction, or the receptor cell dampening with insulin resistance, and how it reduces dopamine uh, uptake in the brain, because one of the problems with ADHD is that we don't deal with dopamine well. We're constantly looking for it because we don't produce it like most people. Well, isn't it interesting that insulin resistance is linked to that? This is another bi-directional thing, though, because ADHD can be caused by trauma and a number of things. But when we add on top of it insulin resistance and this excess glucose and insulin in the brain, now we're worsening it. We're dampening those dopamine receptors even more, making the ADHD worse, making more problems in the brain. So, individuals with ADHD have been found to have higher rates of insulin resistance compared to the general population. So again, is it the chicken or the egg? And I want you to think of just insulin, just address the insulin resistance. It's going to help the ADHD. Will it cure it? No. But understand that if you have ADHD, you're going to have even more problems with insulin resistance than a normal person, and we're going to explain why. So the first one is that dopamine signaling that I was talking about. Insulin resistance can impair dopamine signaling in the brain, contributing to those symptoms. And if you don't understand it, dopamine is crucial for attention, motivation, and impulse control. Okay. So brain insulin sensitivity has shown up in children with ADHD to have lower insulin sensitivity. So they have more insulin resistance, suggesting this link between insulin function and ADHD symptoms. So it's happening even in kids. This is not like, oh, I'm an adult, I've had, insulin resistance for 10, 20 years, and now it's causing ADHD. We see it in children because of our diet today and all the implications that insulin is causing in our bodies. Um, Type 2 diabetes, of course, we know that 88, well, I shouldn't say of course we know, there's a population-based study that found that ADHD was associated with a higher likelihood of having a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. Again, big links between the two. We're not getting into the science of how it occurs. I just want to link it up. Okay, so several potential mechanisms may explain these connections. The dopamine receptor regulation that insulin plays a role in modulating. When insulin resistance occurs, you just don't have that uptake of dopamine. So then insulin resistance can affect the brain's ability to efficiently use glucose for energy, potentially impacting cognitive function. We talked about in dementia and Parkinson's. But it also causes inflammation. So both insulin resistance and ADHD have been associated with increased inflammation. And if you've heard any of the other talks I've done, insulin resistance creates inflammation in the body. Inflammation in the body, whether it be from an injury or some kind of trauma or surgery, increases insulin resistance. So the more inflammation you have, the more likely you are to be insulin resistant. The more insulin resistance you build, the more inflammation you're creating in your body. All of that affects your brain. So, and it can affect your behaviors too. So if you think about kids who are increasingly aggressive and having impulse control problems, Maybe they just are overloaded with sugar and we should address that and their moods would get better. In my healthcare experience, dealing with people with cognitive function disorders, I saw it time and again. When we regulated their sugar, their moods got better. Their outbursts and self-harming and harming of others got way lessened. So their behaviors really improved when I was able to get staff to reduce their sugar intake and have them focus on fats and protein. But not every staff member wanted to do it. So we would still have days where people would, we would just notice increased behaviors. And then I would go back and find the logs and realize that staff had just given this person way too much sugar. There's a big, big link between insulin resistance and brain function in your motor function and in your emotional regulation. Okay, so there's shared genetic factors, and some genetic variants involved in insulin signaling pathway reduction have also been associated with ADHD risk, suggesting this potential common genetic basis. So, if you're already born with ADHD or you have ADHD from trauma or whatever, you just need to know that one of the best things you can do to help yourself is to address insulin resistance and get your sugars under control. We're going to talk about how I did that in just a minute. So, just understand that there's a huge link between ADHD and insulin resistance, primarily through these pathways of dopamine signaling. And I'm not going to get into a lot about ADHD, just the link. Okay. So, screening for metabolic issues, if you have ADHD, could be very helpful to you. Again, use those calculations in my links up above. Um, Now, I'm not a proponent of medications, but they have seen that insulin sensitizing medications improves cognitive function, including ADHD. So we're going to talk about a natural way, a natural solution to those medications to sensitize yourself to insulin resistance in a minute, because I've seen time and again how some of the medications just have too many side effects for me to be comfortable with. Okay, so yeah, and addressing your insulin resistance as early as you can help reduce the severity of ADHD, dementia, Parkinson's, all of it. Basically, the moment you suspect you're insulin resistant, start addressing it. And because it doesn't require medications, you guys, this is easier than you think. You don't have to be hung up by, I have to have a doctor's diagnosis to change my diet, right? Okay. Most all of those. Lindsay, I see you. So, okay, we're closing in here, you guys. I do want to talk about autistic spectrum. I can't even say it. Autism spectrum disorder. Okay. So studies have found that individuals with ASD, particularly youth, have higher rates of insulin resistance compared to those without autistic spectrum disorder. I had done a video months ago and talked about, because people were coming at me about autism and insulin resistance, because the medical community hasn't talked about it. And yet it's a real link and it's one of the things we should be talking about. But what they found is that mothers who are highly insulin resistant, meaning gestational diabetes, have a higher risk of having an autistic child than someone who doesn't experience this gestational diabetes. What we need to understand is, just a little bit of background. Every woman becomes a little bit insulin resistant when they become pregnant. Why? Because we're sacrificing the mother for the child, basically. We're taking all of that energy and we're diverting it to the placenta and the growing baby so that it has the energy to grow the baby. Mom's cells are becoming insulin resistant to allow the growth of the baby. In some women, that insulin resistance that's necessary and a natural part of pregnancy pushes over into gestational diabetes. And when that happens, now the mother is not getting the energy she needs. The baby's not getting the energy they need. The brain function is changing in that developing child because of the mother's gestational diabetes, increasing the risk of having an autistic child. Now, I want to slow down a second here because the way I said that makes it sound like autistic spectrum people have less brain function. We just have different brain function. In fact, on IQ tests, if you sit me in front of an IQ test, which has happened before, like the first one that I did was days long, and I got it done in less than a third of the time of a normal person, and the staff was shocked to say the least because I got it done so quickly. And they were like, "Are you sure you don't want to go back and take a look at this and re-answer some things and make sure you got all the answers right?" And I'm like, "I already did it once. Why would I want to do it twice?" The shocker for them was not only did I get it done quicker, but my IQ level was extremely high. So let's dispel that myth that people with an autistic diagnosis are somehow dampened in cognitive function as far as intelligence. We can be extremely intelligent, and yet, like I said earlier, my brain has to have time to make sense of things. I'm not a very good jump out the seat of your pants person. I want to make sense of it first. So that's where it changed my brain. But understand that a mother who has diabetes is at higher risk for having a child with autism. That's important. Um, I see it in my own daughter. I had gestational diabetes. I had preeclampsia. I had a number of things when I was pregnant with my daughter. And my daughter is extremely intelligent, but also extremely autistic. She has sensory disorder problems. Things just really get to her quicker. Her safe space is out in the woods. My safe space is in the water. Put me in the water away from everyone else, and I'm good. But I take responsibility for her autism, knowing that I was diabetic in pregnancy and that had I known any of this, my daughter might have an easier time with some of those sensitivities. So that's my gig on that. All right. So there are some potential mechanisms between insulin resistance and autistic spectrum disorder. So brain insulin resistance is happening. That reduced glucose metabolism in the central nervous system can contribute to autistic spectrum disorder symptoms. The neuronal network hyperexcitability. Whew, that's a lot of words, right? So, insulin resistance and metabolic abnormalities may lead to an imbalance between excitatory and inhibitory synapses in the brain. Kind of leads back into ADHD as well, right? So, impulse disorder problems, this is happening because insulin resistance is impacting those pathways. Okay. There's epigenetic changes. Metabolic reprogramming may alter gene expression related to ASD. So, what that means is getting insulin resistance under control, teaching your body once again how to act metabolically can help autistic spectrum disorder. All of that just means get your insulin resistance under control, get normal levels, functioning levels of insulin going on. Your brain will function better. Autistic spectrum disorder symptoms and signs can get better. Yes, they can. It has for me, it has for my daughter, and I have a number of other people who have experienced the same thing. And I've seen it when I was working with clients before I understood insulin resistance. I just understood get the sugar out of their diet. They do better. Okay. So, this maternal metabolic syndrome, autistic spectrum risk, which is what I just talked about with pregnancy. So, that maternal insulin resistance, obesity, and diabetes may predispose you to having that autistic spectrum child, and this chronic activation of anabolic cellular pathways. So, that can result in um, GABAergic signaling and neuronal network hyperexcitability, meaning that, like, my daughter's sensitivities to sound, to light, to smells has been activated by a mother who was insulin resistant, produced a child with autistic spectrum syndrome, taught her to eat improperly, so she gained insulin resistance from me as well. Now, all of that compounds and makes it hard for her to function in life, as far as some of these sight, sound, smells issues. She does well, but it takes more effort for her. And what a amazing thing that she's been working on her insulin resistance and has been far more functional, far less reclusive. Yes, it links into autistic spectrum disorder. So then we talk about the brain glucose metabolism in autistic spectrum people. So this reduced glucose uptake in the brain, or the brain's ability to use glucose, may parallel disturbed connectivity observed in patients with ASD. Sugar is impairing their behaviors and worsening negative behaviors, dampening better behaviors because of the signaling from too much sugar, creating too much insulin. So intermittent fasting, exercise, reducing your sugars, focusing on protein and fats can help all of the things we did above, talked about above. Now, if you're interested, I have a book called 8 Simple Steps to Managing Insulin Resistance. It goes over some of those in a little bit more detail, and it gives you a way to just sit down and be like, "Oh, what was it she said? Yes, this, yes, this." If you're like me and you need to refer back to stuff, ask me for the 8 Simple Steps ebook. I'm going to have to send it to you in a link, but we'll get it done. Okay. So understand that insulin resistance is causing this problem. Now, um, oh, there's more on autistic spectrum disorder. I'm going to go past all of that. Right. So much on, I just don't have time to go over all the stuff about autistic spectrum disorder today. But what I do want to talk about is this, the system that I use. So, how did this affect my ADHD, my autism, my heart, my liver, my swelling, my neuropathy, my hair growing in, my teeth, and all of that? We're going to talk about the brain. But look, fiber, which is 7 different types of fiber in this, and insulin sensitivity. The combination of the soluble and insoluble fibers in this packet can help slow the absorption of glucose, potentially leading to better blood sugar control and improved insulin sensitivity. This has been shown to reduce a blood sugar spike by 43%. That's going to drastically impact your metabolic health, increasing your metabolic flexibility. There is no other way that I know of to get this type of fiber in with my meal, other than, like I said yesterday, eating a bushel of broccoli. And even that's one type of fiber. This has 7 different scientifically combined fibers specifically directed at your metabolism. So you find it in my profile link. And this is as easy as it is, you guys. I do it at least once a day. I always do it before I eat. Sometimes I drink it in between because I just like the effects of the fiber. So I just tore the lid off the top. You get a bottle like this when you order. I'm just going to pour it in here, just like that. And this was designed like this so it will fit into a water bottle. And then you're just going to give it a quick shake. About 4 shakes. It's mixed up. I'm going to drink this down. Now, I just gave my body those 7 different types of fiber that can reduce a blood sugar spike by 43%. I do it in the morning because I have some heart problems and I have some nausea problems. This actually helps with that as well. But the effects of this that I just took, even though I won't eat for a few hours, compounds over the next few hours. When I have my meal, I'll have another one. Now I have even better protection for all those glucose spikes than I did before. This is going to start to help soothe that nausea that I feel from my heart. It's going to help with the acids in my gut. No more Tums, none of that stuff. Right? I rarely have acid reflux anymore, but this helps with all that. It's real food that's giving me gut health, feeding my my gut microbiome, the healthy microbiome. So it's like $1.90 a packet. It's one of the best things I can do for my health, and so I do it every morning. Now, that drink also has phytosterols, and they help reduce cholesterol absorption, and that contributes to better cardiovascular health, which, when we have better blood flow, improves the brain, right? So I know when I'm drinking this, I'm helping my gut, I'm helping my brain, I'm helping my heart, I'm helping so many things just by adding this type of fiber in, all of it based on science, okay? There's research studies done on all of the stuff I just talked about. So it improves my insulin sensitivity by reducing that blood glucose spike and not forcing my insulin to go as high. How is it reducing a blood glucose spike? Those fibers encapsulate the sugars that you eat and slow them down from entering the bloodstream. They slow it down in the intestinal system so that you're getting this like time release of the glucose and the energy that you've taken in instead of just getting this overload all at once, which is happening when we're eating foods without fiber. So slowing down a glucose spike, thereby slowing down an insulin spike. Again, up to 43% reduction in glucose when taken with a meal, especially a high glucose meal. So that is number one in helping. It will eventually help with your blood flow as you get those blood sugars under control, which helps them with your brain function. We've learned this morning, right? Especially with the inability to get blood flow to the brain. It also can help with that innermost layer of the blood vessels that are thickening, allowing them to be normal again and have normal function, which again increases blood flow to the brain and helps with Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. I didn't talk about Huntington's. There is, even though genetic disposition for Huntington's is higher than anything else, there is a link. Anxiety, depression, migraines, all rely on this nutrient and blood flow to the brain. This is helping the body increase blood flow and build stronger blood vessels through the actions I've talked about. So it's also high in vitamins and minerals, supporting your overall metabolic health. We've put those in there to make sure that happens. Again, it's stabilizing your blood sugars. And so all of that's helping. The second piece, the tea that you've been seeing me drink this morning. So this is the system. Oh, this is the system daily. A tea in the morning, a tea around lunchtime, and a fiber meal, pre-meal drink before you eat your biggest meal with carbohydrates. Now, so that's what you get is 2 of these a day and 1 of this a day. I use more than 1 of this, and that's fine. I can buy an extra box of those. It's not a problem. And I always have extra around because who knows what's going to happen in my crazy life. But the tea, it's high in chlorogenic acids. Now, since we're talking about the brain, one of the nutrients that can actually cross the blood-brain barrier is chlorogenic acids. So there's 375 times more chlorogenic acids in this that positively affect the brain than in a standard normal yerba mate tea. That's why this one, again, about $1.90 a packet, less than a canned yerba mate, less than a bagged yerba mate to get those same effects. It's an effective way to get it in. And it's the same thing. I just rip off the top, mix it in some water. I carry it around in my Stanley mug and I sip on it all morning. What it's doing too is those chlorogenic acids also produce antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects, not just in your body, but in your brain. Remember, inflammation in the brain is causing problems with ADHD. It causes problems with autism. It causes problems with Alzheimer's. It causes problems with vascular dementia. This is helping with that antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effect in the brain. And these effects can help protect the brain cells and support overall brain health. So if you guys are interested in the system, just go to my link and tap on it. I'll put it in over here in Facebook. Hey, Donna. Hey, fam. Sorry, I didn't see your message just a little bit ago. Okay. So this does have a little bit of naturally occurring caffeine in it, about the same as a cup of coffee. The interesting thing that I don't hear enough people talk about is that there's some components in there called chlorogenic acids, theobromine, and mate saponins. All big words. All you need to know are they are adaptogens. And what they do is a number of things. But one of the things they do is they help mediate the effects of caffeine. So you're getting all the energy, but you're not getting the crashes. You're not getting the stuff that's affecting your heart negatively. So there is caffeine in it, but it's offset by these other components. So if we were to think about a woman walking a tightrope, a tight line, and she has a rod there that's her balancing rod. And we put on one side of the balancing rod caffeine, okay? And we put on the other side of the rod chlorogenic acids. Coffee contains a little bit of chlorogenic acids. It starts to balance it out, but it still is really heavy towards the caffeine, and the woman's going to fall off the tightrope. We add more of this chlorogenic acid. We add theobromine in. We add um, mate saponins in, and now we have balance with the caffeine. So it's smoother, and you walk that tightrope a lot better. You're not falling off into anxiety and anger and all of that. You just have really good sustained energy that's not damaging to your heart, but it's getting energy to your brain. So now you also have better mental clarity. Um, Again, I have a friend who she was having neurological issues that really looked like Parkinson's type tremors. And it was really debilitating for her. And I was visiting her and she was having these tremors. And it was before I knew all of this stuff, but I was just like, I know that this affects the brain. Let's try it. And so I was like, will you, if I mix this up for you, will you try it? So we mixed one up. She didn't sip on it, she drank it down. Her tremors were like this when I handed her the tea. 5 to 10 minutes later, she was almost completely stable. Now, should it affect things that quickly? I don't know all the components that affected her that quickly, but as long as she was using the Unimate, she was not having tremors like she was before, and her doctors couldn't explain her tremors and had no way out for her. So the only relief she had was to drink the tea, and it worked. It works on the brain. It was actually developed as a mental health tool. So it helps. Theobromine in the yerba mate contributes to improved mood and cognitive function. That was one of the pieces that I talked about just a second ago. Um, the combination of these compounds in Unimate supports efficient nutrient and energy delivery to the brain, enhancing cognitive function and mental well-being. So when used together, the fiber and the tea supports efficient nutrient and energy delivery to the brain, potentially enhancing cognitive function and mental well-being. So rather than taking medications, I'm just asking you to think. I'm not telling you what to do. But think about that. Rather than taking a bunch of medications that are going to worsen your insulin sensitivity, your insulin resistance, and increase brain function decline, would you rather have a natural system that increases brain function, that decreases insulin resistance and increases insulin sensitivity without causing the long-term negative side effects that some of those antipsychotics have been shown to cause? Think about it. If that's an avenue you want to take, then go check it out. There's a website up there. So if you have questions, it explains. There's a nutritional panel in there, and then there's a button for you to order. But it's about $5 a day, guys. It can actually drastically improve your brain health. So another story, before I get into another story, is anybody else experiencing any of those symptoms or know someone who could benefit from understanding that getting your insulin resistance under control can improve your brain function? I think I'm going to go ahead and write a blog post on this and include more of the science so you can sit down and read that and the citations and stuff, because I just kind of blew past a lot of things today. But understanding that getting your insulin resistance under control improves your brain function was crazy to me. And it was so much so that I didn't realize it, but I have a friend that we were doing coaching work. We were doing subconscious reprogramming, talking to people about their thought patterns and changing them and doing all kinds of work like that. She worked with veterans with disability. I worked with women who had suffered from sexual trauma. But we got together on a Wednesday to practice, the delivery of the content we were going to give on Friday. And partway through the meeting, she said, "Stop." And I was like, "What?" She said, "I want to know what you did. You have more clarity. You are happier. You're just a whole different person than when you were when we met last week. What did you do different?" The only thing that I had done different was on Sunday or on Saturday night, I got my system. On Sunday morning, I started drinking the tea. So I drank it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Wednesday, my brain function was already so much better and my mood so improved that without anybody knowing I had done anything different, I was being asked, "What did you do?" And I have reports of people all around the world who say the same thing. They start this system and their mood improves. Their sleep gets better. Their these tremors and stuff get better. Their cognitive function is just better and they're more back to the person that they know they can be instead of being this anxious, migraine filled, depression filled person with all these other issues. So, get your insulin resistance under control to affect your brain. Check out my website. I'm getting the blog attached to that website so you guys can go read the articles with more science in it than I am able to deliver on these videos. And we'll see you guys Monday. Not sure what I'll talk about Monday. If you have suggestions of things you want me to talk about, let me know. I appreciate you guys all being here and understanding the willingness to understand different avenues to address your health. And I do want to say, everyone, the biggest thing I want you to take away from all of this is this one statement. I, the more research I've done and the more doctors I've listened to who understand metabolic health, they say 95% of our diseases and disorders today are linked to metabolic health. And metabolic health is driven by our insulin sensitivity or our insulin resistance. So, the biggest impact we can have on our health, whether it's your brain, your gut, your joints, is to get your insulin under control. The system in my profile allows that to happen. So, how many of you guys feel like to get your mental health back, $5 a day would be worth it for you? Would that be it? Would that be worth you guys feeling better? No more migraines, potentially no more migraines. Increasing your mental well-being, decreasing symptoms from autism, from ADHD, staving off the potential gaining of dementia of any sort as you age. Would $5 a day be worth that for you guys? Because that's all it is. And it's a tea that the tea tastes like a lemon iced tea. So it has a really great flavor. I actually put mine in about 30 to 40 ounces of water on ice. In the wintertime, I'll drink it hot. That's the other thing is there's no steeping of the tea. There's none of that. This is simple, sustainable, portable. I am traveling to Kentucky next week. So you know what? One of the first things I packed is my system. I won't go anywhere without it. Even on, I'm going to drive because I'm taking a load over. I will have at least a day, if not 2 days worth of this in the front seat of my car so that it's accessible to me. If I get tired when I'm driving, I'm going to have a Unimate. It wakes me up, keeps me clear and focused on the road. By the way, with ADHD driving, you get tired because your brain has less to think about. And you just get tired when you're ADHD. This helps keep me awake and alert on the road with my ADHD and that brain function. It also just helps me with mood. You guys, I have such good moods most days. I no longer have the depression and anxiety that I used to have. And part of it's because my body feels better all the way around. So if it's worth it for you guys to spend $5 a day, 3 drinks, not replacing meals, not any of that, try it out because it could change your life. Ben's in here. It's changed his life. By the way, Ben is 82. Go follow him. He's starting to get content out. It's completely changed his life. He's fit. He has mental clarity. He's doing amazing. And the system has been a big part of that. And I know that I saw Ro in here. She might not be in here now because she has to go to work, but Ro is on the system as well. Tammy's on the system. There's a number of people that are in here that are on the system, and it's actually helped them. So give it a shot. Let me put it in over here before I head out on Facebook, YouTube. Again, you guys, the entire thing is on Facebook, YouTube, and we'll see you Monday. Have a good day. I ramble a lot. Bye, guys. Bye, Donna. Whoops, I didn't put this in. Here. There it is. Okay, you guys, if you watch it, there you go. That's where you go.